Jim here of From Scratch Farmstead. Welcome back to the kitchen, and today we're going to make a really quick and natural mozzarella cheese. So if you've never had fresh mozzarella cheese before, it is incredible. And it's also a really easy cheese to make. Within just a couple hours you can have balls of fresh mozzarella made, and it's a quick, simple process. So we're gonna go through that today. We use this cheese for so many things in the kitchen. It just melts beautifully, it tastes great, it goes with so many different dishes. So this is just an all-around awesome cheese to make, and really great place if you're a beginning cheese maker to start in your cheese making. So when we first started making mozzarella several years ago, we just went out on the internet, found a basic mozzarella recipe, and that was great. It worked great. We enjoyed the cheese that we made with it. And then, just in the last couple of years, I got introduced to David Asher's book, The Art of Natural Cheese Making. So this is such an awesome book that I highly recommend for every cheesemaker. It helps you understand more than just the steps in the process of cheese making, but really gets into the ecology within milk and cheese and how that impacts the whole process. Awesome read, pick up a copy of this. And one of the things that also helped me understand was that some of the processes I was using for making mozzarella were not the most natural. So the first step for mozzarella is that you're going to be acidifying your milk, and that's what gives it its stretchiness. And kind of the standard method of doing that in cheese making today is using citric acid. And citric acid is not always the most natural of products. A lot of times it contains genetically modified ingredients. And so I've switched to using apple cider vinegar to acidify it. You can also use lemon juice. But I'm gonna break more of that down for you as we go. So let's go ahead and get started making this quick and natural mozzarella cheese recipe. So we're gonna start with getting the apple cider vinegar ready to acidify the milk. This is the type that we use. It's an organic, raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar with the mother. And so you're gonna wanna use a half cup of apple cider vinegar for every gallon of milk that you're using. So I'm gonna be making mozzarella with 2.5 gallons of milk today. So I measured out 1 1/4 cups of apple cider vinegar. And then I'm gonna pour in 2 cups of water to dilute the apple cider vinegar. And that's just gonna help to acidify the milk more evenly once we pour it in. So I'm going to go ahead and start pouring in my milk into the stock pot. So like I said, I'm using 2.5 gallons of milk here, but you can really use any quantity of milk that you have on hand for making mozzarella. I will include a link to the full recipe on our website in the description box below, so you can just check that out and adjust any quantities that you need based on the amount of milk that you're using. You will want to source the freshest milk possible that you can. We have a family milk cow, and so this milk is fresh, milked within the last day or two. So we always recommend getting fresh milk from a local farmer if you can. Store-bought milk will also work fine for this recipe, but you'll want to find the freshest and least processed milk that you can for your cheese making. So in our milk, the cream is separated, so you can see I'm pouring half the jar of milk in, then shaking up the rest to make sure the cream gets fully incorporated in, and then pouring the rest of the milk into the pot. I should also mention that you will want to start with cold milk for making mozzarella. If you pour your diluted apple cider vinegar into too warm of milk, you'll run the risk of curdling it. And so start with cold milk. If you do have your own source of fresh dairy and just milked that morning, you'll want to make sure you chill down that milk good before you go ahead and start making mozzarella. And I didn't mention this earlier when talking about the apple cider vinegar, but you can also use fresh squeezed lemon juice as a source of acid to add to the milk, and you just use the same proportions for that, a half cup per gallon, and then dilute it with some water. So we're going to go ahead and move that stock pot over to a stovetop burner on medium heat to get it warming, and then we're going to go ahead and add in the diluted apple cider vinegar right away. So we're just going to incorporate it slowly into the milk. So just pour it in at a light stream and stir it in as you're going. And again, this is acidifying the milk as it's heating up to 90 degrees, and this is what's going to give your cheese its stretchiness. So once your milk is acidified and then you heat it past 110 degrees, which is going to happen later in the process, the calcium will release from within the curd that is formed, and that's what gives mozzarella the stretchiness that it's known for. So again, you're adding in this apple cider vinegar slowly into the cold milk, and it will acidify the milk as it's warming up to 90 degrees. Okay, so once you've poured in all the apple cider vinegar, you're going to continue stirring the pot of milk regularly until it has reached 90 degrees. While that's heating up, we're going to step aside and get ready for the next step, which is going to be adding the rennet. So we we like to use Welco-Ren rennet tablets. That's the most natural form of animal rennet that we've found for home cheese making. You'll want to look at the recommended amount of rennet on the packaging for the amount of milk that you're using. But you can see here I'm using 4 tablets, which is actually a little higher than the recommended amount. I've had better results using a little bit higher amount of rennet for making mozzarella. You can play with this and figure out what works best for you over time, but I used a little bit higher than what's recommended. And you're just going to put those tablets in some water and let them dissolve. I kind of go in and break up the tablets a little bit and make sure they're fully dissolved into the water. So we've been making sure to stir the milk in our stock pot, and you can see we're just about at 90 degrees now. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that stock pot off the heat, and then the next step is going to be adding the rennet that we just got ready. So we're going to pour in the rennet quickly, and then we're going to stir it up right away for a full minute. And you want to make sure you're stirring pretty aggressively during this time, and want to make sure that you are really stirring that rennet into the full pot of milk. So after a minute of stirring, you'll pull out the spoon and the thermometer and put a cover on top of it, and you're just going to let it sit undisturbed anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes until the curd has set. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to head over to the sink with a large bowl and fill it about half to 2/3 filled with cold water. And this is going to form a cold water bath that we're going to use later to place our cheese balls into once they're formed. So I'm also going to add a couple teaspoons of salt in here and let those dissolve. And that salt is going to add a nice salty flavor to our cheese as it's chilling down later. And then we're going to go ahead and throw that bowl in the fridge and just let it continue to cool down until we're ready for it. Then next I'm going to take a medium-sized pot that can go on the stove top and fill that about 2/3 filled with warm water, and this is going to be used as a hot water bath that will be heated between 160 and 180 degrees to help us shape and form our cheese balls. So we're going to jump back over to that stock pot, pull off the cover and check for a clean break. So we're going to do that by inserting our finger in at about a 45-degree angle, pulling it up and making sure the curd is fully set. So we have a good clean break here. So next we're going to take a long bladed knife and start cutting the curd into roughly 3/4 to 1 inch cubes. So you start by making vertical cuts top to bottom, and then you switch to vertical cuts left to right until you have kind of a checker pattern on the top of the cheese. And then once you have that, then you start making horizontal cuts in the cheese. And so basically I just hold the knife horizontally and just start towards the top and continue to angle it down and make slices horizontally as you go. And I like to switch directions and cut in every direction in the cheese. Really, you just kind of slice it and cube it as best you can. And then we're going to switch back to our wooden spoon to start stirring the curd. So you're going to want to stir it for a good 15 minutes. And what happens in this process is the curd is releasing its whey. And so that's what you do by slicing it up into smaller cubes, is you're creating more surface area, which allows the curd to release its whey. So during this process, you'll see the curd go from having sharp edges to more curved edges. And as I find large chunks during this step that I missed cutting with the knife, I just break those up with the spoon into smaller chunks. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that pot for the hot water bath on the stove top and put a thermometer in there and get it heating up to between 160 and 180 degrees. The curd is done when it has about the consistency of a poached egg. So you can kind of pick up a chunk and feel it, and once it gets to that poached egg consistency, then you know you're done. So about 15 minutes has passed of stirring our curd and we're at that poached egg consistency now. So next we're going to be scooping the curd out of the pot. We're going to be switching from our wooden spoon to a curd spoon. You can see here that I have a colander on top of a large bowl that's going to catch the whey underneath. So we're just going to go one scoop at a time and scoop out the curd into the colander and let that whey continue to drain out of the curd. A lot of cheesemakers do here what's called pouring off the whey, where they'll actually pour the whey out of the stock pot into some sort of colander or strainer. I've not had the best results with that. I found it easier just to scoop out the whey one scoop at a time. It's a little more tedious, but it works for me. And once all that curd is out of the pot and into the colander, I like to slide the curd spoon along the outside of the curd and just pull it in towards the middle and continue to release some whey out of the curd. You don't want to slice into the curd, you want to keep it intact as much as you can. I just go ahead and slide that curd spoon in along the outside, go along the whole edge and pull it in to release some more whey. Then you're just going to let that curd sit for a good 15 to 20 minutes and let it solidify into one solid chunk of curd. So while I'm waiting for that, you can see how much whey has accumulated in the bowl underneath the colander already, and so I'm just going to pour out that whey so we can start fresh, and that whey can continue to drain out of the curd. Alright, so at least 15 minutes has passed and that curd is set up nicely now. So we're going to take our knife again and we're going to cut it into sections that are going to form your balls of mozzarella cheese. So you could really divide this up any way that you would like. What I do usually is just start by slicing it in half, and then I turn it 90 degrees and slice it down the middle. Then I usually end up making about 16 balls of cheese. So I make 3 slices on either side of that middle cut that I made, and that'll give me 8 sections of curd on each side, or 16 altogether. So jumping over to my hot water bath now, it's right between that 160 to 180 range, so we're going to go ahead and get started making our mozzarella balls. So I found that working with 4 sections of curd at a time is what seems manageable, so I'm going to go ahead and pull out 4 sections of curd and place those into the hot water bath, and you're going to leave those in there for about 5 minutes. And again, what this is doing is heating the cheese so it's above 110 degrees, so that calcium will be released from the curd and it will develop that stretchiness. So we're going to let those sit there and wait for 5 minutes. Then we're going to pull out 1 section of curd and give it the stretch test. So basically you're just going to stretch it out slowly and make sure it has a good stretch to it. If it doesn't, you could place it back in the hot water bath and pull it out again and give it another try. If you find that after that it's not stretching but it's more breaking apart as you pull it, unfortunately this means that your acidity level was probably not right with the milk, and you'll still end up with great mozzarella cheese. It might not look the prettiest because it won't stretch and form into nice smooth balls of mozzarella, but you'll want to adjust your apple cider vinegar or acidity level the next time you make it, and this is pretty common. I had this happen quite a bit when I was first making mozzarella. Generally it meant that I was adding too little acidity to the milk. Usually increasing the amount of apple cider vinegar would remedy that. Then we're just going to keep going through this process of working with 1 section of curd at a time and kneading it and shaping it into balls of mozzarella cheese. And so the kneading process is similar to kneading bread. What I do is just keep tucking the cheese back into itself. So on that back side of that ball of cheese, you're tucking it in with your fingers, tucking it back within itself. Then on the top side you're developing surface tension with the cheese. And so once we cut into one of the balls of cheese later, you'll see the layers that have formed within it as you're going through that kneading process and tucking it back within itself. So here's what a nice freshly made ball of mozzarella cheese looks like. We're gonna go ahead and plop that into the cold water bath that I've taken out of the fridge now and let that chill down and firm up in the cold water bath. So here's a close-up of the stretch test, and with this particular piece of cheese I felt that it could use a little bit more time in the hot water bath, so I actually put it back in there, set it on the curd spoon, put it back in there, and then took it out just about a minute later, gave it the stretch test again, and it had a beautiful stretch to it. Alright, so here's a close-up of working and kneading a ball of mozzarella, so you can see it's just kind of being tucked on the back side within itself. And I should mention here that I did put gloves on for this process because I'm working with water that's above 150 degrees. You can make mozzarella with a hot water bath that's 150 degrees or lower. I've just never had very good results with that. I've always had better results when I heat the water up to 160 or 180 degrees. And so that's what I'm doing here, and at that temperature you'll want to wear gloves because your hands will be pretty uncomfortable if you're not. So after stretching and then kneading the cheese, just kind of do a final shaping into a ball with my hands. You can see we have a beautiful ball of mozzarella here. So what I've been doing with all the balls of mozzarella after I'm done forming them is putting them into the cold water bath. And then once you're done shaping all your balls, you can go ahead and throw that back into the fridge. And you're going to let those sit in the fridge for a couple hours until they've chilled down and firmed up. So as always with cheese making, you will have a lot of whey left over at the end. So what I'm doing here is pouring that whey into jars, and we actually use this for cooking. You can use it as a stock. We soak rice or beans in it, things like that. Or you can also pour it in your garden as a fertilizer, and that's what I'm doing here. This is a patch of asparagus that we planted this year. So a couple hours later, our mozzarella is out of the fridge, and I'm gonna cut into a fresh mozzarella ball here, and that is gonna go perfect on a pizza or a sandwich or just for fresh eating. Now for storage, you do want to take the mozzarella balls out of the cold water bath and just store them in a container. After they're in there, you'll want to make sure to drain out any of the liquid that continues to drain off of them. We've also found that mozzarella freezes really well. You can flash freeze them on a cookie sheet and then put them in bags to store in the freezer and then pull them out for eating later. So that's our quick and natural mozzarella recipe. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And if you've wanted to try making a hard cheese, we have a really great recipe for your first attempt at making a hard cheese. It's a farmhouse cheddar. So we have another video where we make that farmhouse cheddar. So we'll link up to that video next, and we'll see you in that one.